Good morning, good afternoon, good days, colleagues, and all the members of travel and tourism industry worldwide who are with us today. I'm Hulya Aslantas, former world president 2009 and interim vice president of the 2022 Skål International Executive Board. It is my pleasure to be with you all today. As you know, Skål International's birthday is April 28, which is celebrated as World Skål Day. And on April 28 this year, as we have already announced, all the colleagues are invited to connect to Torremolinos for an online celebration in presence of our President Burçin Türkan and with all the executive board members and international Skål councillors. Since a couple of years, we have extended our celebrations to cover the whole month of April with various activities. Today, I'm very honored to be hosting Richard Banks, often called the father of modern adventure travel and the pioneer in travel that makes a difference, travel with a purpose. Welcome, Mr. Banks, and thank you for joining us from LA so early in the morning, which is like 5:40. My goodness.
It's 6:30, but
no,
that's
6:30.
Yeah,
about it's about 6:30.
It's coffee time. Yeah,
exactly. Before we hear all about your very exciting adventures and your colorful stories, I would like to start by your bio, which is in fact not easy to summarize. I can tell you that. I will try to keep it short, but no matter how much I try, it's going to be a challenge. In fact, for many of us in the travel business, you probably need no introduction. Richard has been a pioneer in travel, digital media, e-commerce, and other frontiers. In the early 90s, he produced the first internet travel site called mtsobek.com. He made the first travel CD-ROM, an adventure disc, and the first virtual expeditions, terraquest.com. He was the founder and editor-in-chief of Mungo Park, a pioneering Microsoft travel publishing effort. He was part of the founding executive team of Expedia.com and served as the editor-at-large. He was creator and publisher of Expedia Travels magazine and executive producers of Expedia Radio and co-founder of executive director of Expedia Cafes. He was co-founder and served as president of several travel-related sites like Outward Bound, Welltraveled.com, Great Escapes, and other Microsoft travel initiatives, First and Best for MSN, Sobek Expeditions, and then he recently co-directed an IMAX film, Mystery of the Nile. Richard has published more than 1,000 magazine articles, 19 books, produced a score of documentaries and several CD-ROMs, and has lectured at the Smithsonian, National Geographic Society, the Explorers Club, and many other notable venues. He writes a semi-regular feature with the New York Times. Richard served as executive producers of Richard Banks' Adventures on Yahoo. So merging inspiration and passion for adventure travel and storytelling, whatever the medium, has won him just about every award in the book that we know of. Too many to list here, just to name a few, like Emmy Awards, Cine Golden Eagle Award, Green Oscars, Telly Awards, Travel Weekly's Magellan Award, Lowell Thompson Travel Journalism Gold Awards, and these on several consecutive years. You have a long list, which we have included in his bio with the invite, and you can always check here, but it's really an amazing list. He has spent 30 years as an explorer and communicator, and along the way led first descendants of 36 rivers around the globe. And I think rivers is very important for him, including the Yangtze in China and the Zambezi in Southern Africa. In fact, he's among the 100 great explorers of the last 100 years. What he's up to now is storytelling adventures in the influencer marketing realm. He is the Chief Adventure Officer, and I love that title, Chief Adventure Officer of the famous Steller.com, that we will talk about it in a while in more detail. This an Apple App of the Year. It won the App of the Year in 2019, and today it is the world's largest travel storytelling platform. In fact, to cut the story short, I now would like to make a flashback to Richard's college years, which I found on the internet reading about him, which I think is very interesting. This will help us to understand how his career started. He was at the college. He spent summers as a Colorado River guide in the Grand Canyon. After college, Banks and some friends ran wild rivers in Ethiopia. In February 1973, he and his crew successfully ran the Awash River in Ethiopia. His identity as a river guide was solidified at that point. Banks and his penniless friends figured they could finance a return trip or two by taking clients along, and so they did. So let's cut it here and go right to the heart of current trends in international travel and words we know too well, subject to change. Once again, good morning, Richard, and welcome. And I do mean good morning. It's really early for you, but let's start. Tell us now, how did your journey, good afternoon, thank you. How did your journey as an adventure traveler and pioneer of modern adventure travel begin and go on with your early adoption of the World Wide Web and all the way up to the present as a co-founder of Steller? I think I spoke too much now. I leave the floor with you. Tell us about your colorful life. How did you start and how did we end up with Steller?
Well, I'm flattered by your intro. Well,
it's the least.
Yeah. If I dial back to the beginnings, I can share without any repercussions at this point. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, and my father was one of the early officers at the newly formed CIA, and we lived on the Potomac River, and the headquarters for the operation was across the river, and my father found that it was easier to canoe across the river to headquarters than to take the freeway. So he got me involved in canoeing on the Potomac River very early on, and I loved the activity. And there was a group in Washington, D.C. called the Canoe Cruisers Association, and they would spend all of their weekends. These bureaucrats would throw off their ties and then take to the birch bark and the aluminum and barrel down these wild rivers that are all over the Shenandoah, Appalachian, and Blue Ridge Mountains in the region. And I got so involved in that. But the group decided to go to the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon and do the first descent of the river in open canoes in 1968, I think it was, or something. And they came back and showed these films that were so extraordinary, so bigger and profound than anything I had ever witnessed in my short career as a local river runner, that I applied for a job as a river guide, which was a nascent occupation back then. It had been in the late 60s that Bobby Kennedy had gone rafting down the Colorado River, and it became an event, and it was well covered by Life magazine and several others. And suddenly people were aware that this was a kind of a cool activity to do. So they were looking to hire guides, and I proposed that I would be a good addition to the roster, and I was hired on the spot through a letter where I boasted of some of my descents. And I noticed that many of the rivers in the west of the U.S. had similar names in the east. So I said, "Oh, I'd been down the Green River. I'd been down, various the salmon, et cetera, and all these existed in the East Coast." So they took it that I had this extraordinary experience. They hired me, and I went and became a guide, and that turned my head on a different axis than anything I had experienced before, seeing the wonder and the beauty of sharing travel experiences with people who came from all walks of life, but they shared a commonality. This was a new activity, and that they were curious and bold to some extent. They were willing to take some risk to go and experience the rewards of this type of travel. So I got excited by it, and when I heard that there was going to be an expedition down a river in Ethiopia, the Blue Nile, which was called the Grand Canyon of Africa, I said, I've got to be part of that. So I went and applied to be a member of this expedition. At this point, I thought I was one of the more qualified river guides in the world, and the leader of the expedition said that I was a little bit too scrawny. So he said, look, this leaves a year from now. Why don't you see if you can pump up a little bit and come back, and I'll see if I can get you on. So I did. I went back to college. I went to Northwestern, and I spent the entire time trying to pump myself up, and drinking protein shakes and working out every day. And I came back several months later and knocked on his door and said, I'm ready to go on this geographic expedition. They were calling it the river trip of the century. And I'm your guy. And the leader said, I'm sorry, all the slots are taken. I gave it to my brother, the last spot. So I was devastated. But I decided at that point that I could do it on my own. So I organized a group of friends, and we went over to Africa, to Ethiopia, and we had no money, but we figured out ways to get over there and find sponsors, a life jacket sponsor, a rafting company sponsor. And we threw our boats on this river. We ran it. It was extraordinary. I came back to National Geographic and knocked on the door and came in and offered to show them my slides. They were devastated because we were 6 months in advance of their giant expedition. And I said, look, you can use my slides. And they politely said no, and they showed me the door. So I went and decided to start my own company, which was called Sobek Expeditions, after the ancient Egyptian crocodile god, and allow other people to come rafting initially in Africa. And then we slowly started to offer first river trips all over the world, and the Indus in Pakistan, and the Wagi in New Guinea, and great rivers, the Biobío in Chile, all over the world for the next 10 years. And then we expanded into other types of adventure activities, anything that had forward momentum in an outdoor or wilderness natural environment. So we had trekking in the Himalayas, and ballooning, and hiking, and climbing, and scuba diving, anything that was active and outdoor and participatory, we began to offer. And the company grew from there, and became, I think it is one of the largest, if not the largest, adventure travel company in the U.S. And among those in the world at this point. So there's a quick précis. Sorry about that.
No, that's wonderful. Maybe we can go back to you can tell us a bit more about Steller, as it became app of the year. How does it differ from other social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest? There are so many of them. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about Steller.
Oh, of course.
In fact, I've downloaded it, and I suggest everyone does. It tells so much more. It tells all about the hidden things about destinations, and how you will do the adventure in specific places.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's very nice. Yes. Steller.com.
A multi-decade leap at this point.
Yes,
But so Steller is what I'm currently involved in. Steller stands for storyteller, and it is a platform. It's now become, in a very short period of time, I think, the world's largest travel storytelling platform and app. And it's a little bit like let's say Instagram, which is often compared to it, but it is exclusively about travel and the celebration of travel. And it's user generated primarily. Anybody can create a story free anytime, anywhere in the world with all the multimedia tools. It's quite easy. We built it from the ground up in a way that we thought would be more meaningful to travelers than any other social app that's out there. There's no advertising for one, so none of the obnoxious and random ads that seem to show up. And we designed it so that there are outward going links. It's not a closed garden. So anybody who creates a story can link to a
Maybe
guide.
we can start seeing it at the same time while you're telling us about it.
Sure. If we want to, if Esther wants to show a little video on it,
yes.
I can talk through it.
Yes.
So it's also evergreen. So it has stories now from almost every destination, every country in the world, and unlike many of the other apps and platforms, it doesn't go away. So it's there with a long tail. We've been working a lot with tourism boards over the last several years, particularly during the pandemic, to create original content. And there have been two flavors for this. One is we started in 2019 with a project in Ireland we called A Digital Day in the Life of Ireland, which was keyed off of a popular series of books that started in the 80s in Australia, the first, where 100 photographers from around the world were brought into the country and dispatched around to various key points and then given 24 hours to create the best photography they could, all packaged into a beautiful coffee table book that was then distributed globally. It became, at the time, the best-selling book of all time in Australia, and it was replicated around the world. The day in the life of Spain, a day in the life of Italy, a day in the life of the USA, Canada, and on, including Ireland. So we decided to update it and do a digital day in the life of Ireland. And we brought over 27 of the world's top influencers and dispatched them around the island to its sort of key tourism assets and hidden gems. And then they had 24 hours again to create stories. And then we kept everybody there for an extra week to see the rest of the country and create more material against various themes that Ireland is trying to promote. And it ended up being an extraordinary success. The president of Ireland noticed that they'd had an extraordinary uptick in travel in the wake of the campaign. He flew out to Los Angeles and took me out to breakfast for a personal thank you for the difference we had made. They had a record year in the wake of our project, and it did not go unnoticed. Forbes did a couple of features on it, USA Today, and many others as well. But of course, then the unpleasantness showed up at the door in early 2020. So we moved to virtual projects. In Germany, I think, was our first, where we would recruit various creators and influencers who had traveled to Germany prior to the pandemic and had a body of work that had not been published, archival work. And we came up with a series of themes and a hashtag, which was Germany Awaits You. And then we created a whole new set of original stories and then distributed them widely around the internet to a global audience. And it also broke records. And we continue to do this for Australia, Louisiana, Scotland, and many others during the pandemic. As soon as things started to open up, we went to the Republic of Georgia, which is a very strategic location, at least in the eyes of the West. It borders Russia, and 20% of the country is occupied by Russia. USAID was was a sponsor of the project, and we brought over 15 influencers and did a digital day in the life of Georgia, which is a spectacular destination with the Caucasus Mountains, running down the edge of it. And that too turned out to be another success. And so we went back again just a couple of months ago and did a winter version, and we're going back to do a summer version in a couple of months as well. And we're currently doing a project in Singapore that starts next month, and it'll have a long pipeline of destinations with whom we will conduct similar types of campaigns to bring in the best talent that can be sourced in the world to come and celebrate our destination through dynamic and multimedia storytelling via the Steller platform. A quick summary. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, you have a lot of experience in this digital marketing. You are one of the pioneers who started it. So from a professional point of view, I'd like to maybe ask you some more questions which
Sure.
may help to our colleagues.
Yeah.
Like, what are the key developments you're seeing in digital content and influencer marketing? Like, how do you see the digital marketing today, and what are the most significant local focal points we should be paying attention to? What is your definition of influencers? Some of these new words, new terminology is being used in different ways. What is your definitions? And maybe you can offset some of the misconceptions.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've always been a little bit put off by the term influencer. We prefer to call them creators.
Okay.
There are so many different types of influencers. So it's such a broad category. It's difficult to sort of ferret out the good and the not so good and the terrible in it. So there is this whole group of let's call them snappers, the Snapchatters, that are really all about themselves, not about a product or a destination. They tend to be younger, and many of them have garnered large audiences, sometimes many millions of people, but it's really all about me. What I'm doing, how great I am, how wonderful I am, how beautiful I am, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the sort of influencer that we deal with. We are looking for storytellers, people who have a passion for travel. It's one of their key pillars, and they can go to a destination and experience it, look up and down, and come back and distill the essence of a place in a good story. And that's probably the key word. They're storytellers. That's why it's called Steller. We look at the most important metric for us is engagement. So you can have 10 million followers, but if your engagement level is very low, then it's less meaningful. Ultimately, yes, engagement is extremely important. What has been the unmeasurable, in most cases, quantifier has been the actual impact of an influencer campaign. So, how many people book into a destination as a result of a campaign? It's hard to know for sure. We've had some good feedback, as we did in Ireland. We have been working with the Ministry of Tourism in the Republic of Georgia, who have announced in the wake of our campaigns, they saw a 63% rise in international tourism to the destination. And it's important in a country like Georgia, because they're trying to persuade hearts and minds at this point that the West is a vital place to lean for many reasons. One, the economics. When Americans and Europeans visit a country like Georgia, they will spend more money, they'll spend more time than, let's say, the Russian visitor or the local visitors. And that lifts all boats. It becomes meaningful for jobs. in the travel sector, and makes a difference into how that country views itself against the rest of the world. So that's been it's been sort of a critical and very wonderful effect of what we've been doing. Influencers, there's some that are called micro-influencers who don't have large following, but they have extraordinary engagement because the followers are so passionate about what they do and how they tell a story. And those are important to us as well. So we have a database of about 1 million travel influencers around the world. And we will, if we do a campaign, we'll dive in and find the people who have the specialty in the right themes, and then recruit them, and often train them, and then dispatch them to a destination to create one of these campaigns. So
yeah,
I hope that helps.
I know these are all the new terminologies, as I'm saying. So it's still on the way, huh? We have still a long way to go. In fact, what do you see like prime opportunities and challenges over the next, say, 1 or 2 years in the travel industry? What shall we expect? How do you think the travel industry? This is a very popular question nowadays. But what is your view? Do you think that the travel industry has changed a little bit versus pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? Are the minds of people changing? Are we now more closer to the adventure travel, more to the nature? Are we maybe getting away from the mass tourism? How do you see things?
Well, we are certainly at an inflection point at this point, and there are all sorts of prognosticators that are trying to understand where the travel industry will be headed in the next couple of years as we hopefully come out of the pandemic. There's no question that travel is the great antidote to isolation and seclusion and loneliness. So there is a desire to get on the road and travel, I think, that is almost unprecedented, because it's been such a duration of this homebound dynamic. So we're witnessing this now in so many planes that are full, and so many destinations that are seeing numbers that are pre 2019. Venice is seeing enormous numbers of visitors, just as though it were 2019. The pandemic never happened, and many of the destinations that were plagued with over tourism are again facing that situation and trying to understand what to do.
Exactly, they were worried about over tourism. Now it's the contrary.
Yes,
they don't know how to attract anymore. Yes.
Yes, I'm on the board of a nonprofit called CREST in Washington, D.C., which is the Center for Responsible Travel, and one of its key missions is to try to address over tourism, primarily from the outfitter and the tourism board points of view, trying to convince them that the experience is better, and it's better for the planet if alternatives are found to the great iconic destinations right now that everybody seems to want to check off. So, rather than do the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, there are at least a dozen other trails that are equally rewarding that just don't have that name value at this point. And rather than flood Dubrovnik in the middle of summer with thousands and thousands of other people that are squeezing through, it's an unpleasant experience. You as a traveler will come back and say, I'll never go there again. But if you can visit other parts of Croatia, including Istria, which are equally magnificent, then you will have a better positive experience as a traveler, and it's better for the destination and the planet as a unit. So so all those are important. Influencers. I was going to say that traditionally, and I've been doing this long enough to see this shift. Traditionally, we have relied upon this top-down notion of editorial that would come from a trusted source like the New York Times, or travel and leisure, let's say, to advise us, to guide us as to where to go and what might be next. But that whole filtering process, we've discovered, has a certain bias to it, and it also is limiting because there are only so many people that can fit in, let's say, the Sunday travel edition of the New York Times. The space is very limited, and what has emerged with the influencer marketplace is that people can be traveling all over the world at any moment in time, and be honestly and authoritatively and very quickly displaying what is going on in a destination and what it really looks like, rather than the multi-filtered presentations that you'll often see in a newspaper, and even more so and worse from a traveler's point of view in a brochure or catalog. So there is this sense of honesty and reliability and immediacy that comes from the right types of influencers who are reporting from around the world, and that's been rare. The other, let's say, Geographic was the gold standard for so many years. You got a piece in Geographic, and it's like, wow, this is going to make all the difference for everything we do. The problem with something like Geographic, of course, is that the lead time is so long. It would typically take a year or more from the time a reporter was dispatched to a locale to dig it up and tell a meaningful story with great imagery before it was published. And as we know, the world changes so quickly now that if they were going to publish a piece on Moldova, let's say, and they spent a year publishing it, and let's say they did publish it now, it would be irrelevant at this point. Whereas you send a group of influencers to Moldova now, and they'll come back and tell you exactly what's going on and what it's really like. So there is that wonderful element to this new dynamic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. As I said, I have many questions still to ask you, but I also would like to reach out to our viewers, listeners. Probably they will also have some questions that they may want to ask. If you can please type your questions, if any, to the chat box, I'll be happy to direct them to Richard. And while we are waiting for your questions, so what do you think about regenerative travel, for example? That's also a new terminology.
Yes, regenerative travel certainly emerged during the early days of the pandemic. That optimists were looking at this, going, this is a wonderful chance for us to step back and reevaluate how people travel and what we as travel purveyors can correct to make the experience not only better for the traveler, but also better for humanity and for the planet. The term is a little bit loaded because it is talking about how we should repair the damage that travel has done in the past, and it's a very good and positive concept. So rather than the coral reefs being destroyed by not just global warming, but by too many tourists in Fiji, messing around with coral reef, then the travelers will show up and keep a safe distance from the coral reef, be able to enjoy it but not touch it, let's say. And you can apply this concept to almost any place that has suffered to some degree from tourism. The disappointment at the moment is that despite all of the talk that happened during COVID about trying to bring in a new era of tourism, it feels at the moment like we're falling back into old ways, and there are several issues that seem to evaporate that are coming back. For instance, I'll show you a couple of relevant examples. There is a new and heightened discussion about creating a tram that will go up Machu Picchu. So you no longer have to take a tortuous bus ride. I have a lunch today with the president of Tanzania, and I want to talk to her about these plans to create a tram that would go to the top of Kilimanjaro. So you no longer have to earn the climb of Kilimanjaro. It will be great for tourism in Tanzania, but I think it will compromise one of the most integrous experiences that the planet has to offer.
Right.
So I'm a little concerned about how we have fallen back into our previous ways, and people see opportunities, exploitative opportunities, and they're moving forward. I also think we might be seeing a bump in travel at the moment that may calm down a bit after this pent-up desire to get back on the road is fulfilled. There still are a lot of challenges in international travel, as we know. If you're an American to re-enter the US currently, USTOA is lobbying against this, but currently you have to have an antigen or an equivalent test 24 hours before you board a plane to get back in the US. It still exists. And many other countries have dropped that requirement. So that is a non-trivial exercise. I just did it last week in Dublin. And in order to get that antigen test, it was on a Sunday. I had to wait 2 hours in a line. Yeah.
Because it must be last 24 hours. So it's not easy.
It's got to be 24 hours. Yeah. So that intimidates a lot of people. You know, there's still mask wearing for most international flights. You know, that's something that puts a lot of people off. And I think the glamour of travel has eroded a bit, and many people have discovered that there's a lot of worthwhile activities, less expensive and healthier in their own backyard. So my company, mtsobek.com, which does adventure travel, has seen an enormous, almost volcanic rise in travel to the Western United States and its national parks.
Now,
in your own backyard.
Questions are building up in the chat box.
Sure.
I think, in fact, you have touched some of it, but the first question came from Canada, from Jean-François Coté, our Vice President of our International Skål Council. He's saying this conference is about trends. Can you just give the top 5 trends? In fact, we've been touching to some of them, but as a summary, if you look at the next trends, what comes up in your mind?
Well, yeah, that could be interpreted a lot of different ways.
Yes.
One is the destination trends. First of all, I think this is true throughout the planet. People are looking into their backyards as the first opportunity for travel, and that's been particularly true for national parks throughout the world. Australia, which has been really buttoned down, saw a lot of activity where people were visiting the icons in Australia who lived in Australia and Australians for the first time, and that's happened everywhere. And it's been a pleasant discovery for most people. The little delights that are not that difficult to reach. So that's one. Two, another trend would be that people are embracing nature, outdoor travel, activity travel more than ever before. The idea of being on a bus or in a crowded place with strangers, even a cruise ship, has daunted many mindsets. So when they think about planning their vacation, their getaway, their family retreat, whatever it is, it's been more towards let's do something that is healthy and in nature. We'll be exposed to fresh air and sunshine and a breeze and the natural air conditioning that will keep us healthy throughout this period. I mean, we're certainly not over the pandemic yet. I read yesterday that about 500 people a day are still dying, mostly from the BA2 variant. And that's top of mind for many travelers. You know, what can we do that's healthy as opposed to, let's say, museum tours? Quick aside, the project we're doing in Singapore next month is all about the outdoor nature-based activities that you can do in Singapore. The night safaris, the gardens, the zoos, you know, all these things that you can see and do and experience outside in Singapore, which is something of a surprise for most people. They think of it as a giant city-state, all glass and steel, but there are many other aspects to it. So that would be a trend. Another trend that we've seen is that people are wanting more FITs, so foreign independent travel. These are bespoke trips, design trips, where you bring friends and family, people you know, on a destination, to a destination in the way that you would like it. So people are less inclined to sign up with strangers. Because you just never know who you're going to be sitting next to, or whether or not you get along with them, and whether or not they are carrying something that could be transmittable. So I know at my company, MT Sobek, we had a board meeting a couple of weeks ago. Fully 50% now of our travel is bespoke travel, custom travel, as opposed to fixed departures. So that has been on the decline for the last few years. It was certainly accelerated over the last couple of years, and now more and more that's how people want to travel.
Okay.
So anyway, that's three. Is that enough?
I know that's enough because we are touching to several trends anyway along our conversation, because we're only talking about the future anyway. In fact, I'd like to apologize. I said this question was coming from Jean-François Coté, but in fact, it's from Jean-François Grenier who asked you that question. Sorry about that, Mr. Grenier. And now the next question is quite interesting, and it's something we haven't touched so far, which says, can you speak of the subject of adventure travel for the physically handicapped? How how could this be improved in a way? Yeah, that's a good question.
I think that's a great question. It's something that has certainly provoked my thinking over the years. When I started off as a river guide in the Colorado River, I began as a guide on these motorized raft trips, which are a lot stabler than other types of the smaller rafts that people can go through, and they're shorter in duration. So you can travel through the Grand Canyon in a week on a motorized raft. So I'm talking back in the 70s. And there was a movement at the time to make the Grand Canyon a purer experience and eliminate the motors. I had brought a relative who is in a wheelchair on the motorized trip, and who never would have been able to see this extraordinary natural, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, if it hadn't been for a motorized trip. So I lobbied hard to allow motorized traffic during certain months of the year to continue to exist, so that the handicapped and those who are challenged in other ways could experience something that didn't require you to be, an extraordinary outdoorsman to travel, and was successful in that effort early on. And as we've broadened our scope and offered more opportunities around the world, we've always tried to figure out how can we make it accessible. And it's not just for the handicapped or the physically challenged, it's also for the economically challenged. I've always tried to understand how we can allow people to visit some of these places that are prohibitively expensive, and very often they do it on purpose to keep out a certain segment of the traveling public. The Galapagos is a good example. Almost all of East and Southern Africa with the expensive safaris, places like Mauritius, try to go for high-end tourism only. Bhutan is another great example. And so we've come up with scholarship programs. We've come up with work as a substitute for payment opportunities, where you can volunteer to come to a destination and contribute in some way to its betterment rather than pay sometimes extraordinary fees. So that's the economic side. On the handicap side, virtually every raft trip we do is available to the handicapped. I took 100 children from the foundation of the Junior Blind down the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. One of the most amazing experiences for me and for them. They held on tight. We'd pull over to these polished basaltic walls that are just wonderful to touch. And they would all lean over and feel the walls and find delight that the normal passenger never did, just in the tactile sensations that you found in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. They loved it. And I felt very, very, very good about giving that opportunity to a group of people who otherwise would never be able to experience it. I guess the answer to your question is, I think every travel experience should be available to everybody, no matter their restrictions, because travel ultimately is good for everybody: the soul, the planet, the people you meet, the environment you touch, and everything.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Now, I have two questions which are very similar to each other. And both of these questions are coming, one from Ankara, one from Istanbul, both from Turkey. And they say, first of all, thank you very much for your very interesting and inspiring presentation. But they come to the point of virtual adventure programs about metaverse, the latest concept in our world. Although he says, as a DMC, we do not like virtuals, but this is what the clients are asking for. How do we cope the metaverse virtual world with the reality? I mean, the adventure there, and how do we match those things? What do you think about that?
Well, I think a fair amount about it. It's a discussion that has happened, I think, as new technology has emerged throughout the last 20 years or more. I conducted a series of virtual expeditions in the 90s, where we took a team to Antarctica, was the first one, and we in a live manner uploaded imagery and video from Antarctica so that people could take the trip with us and experience it virtually, and then live chats and all done via satellite back then. So from your desktop, you could journey to Antarctica, and again, this made it available to people who otherwise didn't have the means or the ability to travel to a place like Antarctica. And even back then, people were saying, "Oh, this is terrible, because if you can experience it virtually, why would you ever want to go and have jet lag and frostbite or mosquito bites and all the discomfort that can come from real travel?" And maybe virtual travel, and this is true with the metaverse concept and VR, etc. Maybe all these things will become the substitute for the real thing, for the genuine article, like the movie Total Recall or the book by Philip K. Dick, where you can go in and have an implant that will give you the vacation of your choice. And that's sort of where the metaverse is tipping towards. But I think the opposite has been true, and that's that the more people are exposed to the dimensionality and the modalities of the real world through virtual experiences, through goggles of the metaverse or whatever it is, the greater the desire to have the real touch. So high tech, high touch is a concept that people have talked about for some time now. That there is this experience of being singular, singular but attached to many, lonely but in touch with millions, isolated as we experienced in the pandemic, and that seems to inflame this natural desire in all of us to have an authentic feeling, an authentic experience, something tactile,
something real. The real is the real thing.
Something real. And there's nothing, I mean, I mentioned the Kilimanjaro thing earlier. There is nothing more gratifying, I think, for a traveler than earning that experience.
Living,
not just
right? Sharing and living.
Not being passive, but being active, but moving forward step by step. And when you feel the sweat on your back, when you climb up a hill or a mountain, when you feel the sun on your back, when you're rafting down a river, when you have the awe and wonder of seeing the real thing, from the Taj Mahal to Angkor Wat, anything, there is nothing like it that can ever substitute the actual feeling, the multi-dimensional feelings you get, the smells, the sensations,
Sure.
the smiles, the comments, all of that make it something that's even, I think, more desirable. And also you understand that it exists. And that's always been one of the biggest problems in travel, is letting people know that there are other worlds out there, that are, it's important to get out of your home. It's important to make these steps. So anyway,
yes, Richard,
I think it's going to be good.
Yes, I think the real life and the real travel will always exist, because we cannot live in a virtual world. We have to go back to touch base with reality, for sure.
Yes.
So there are two invitations for you, in fact. One is again from Turkey. Mehmet Önkal says, I hope you'll be able to travel on the iconic Euphrates and Tigris rivers from Turkey to Basra, Shat al-Arab in Iraq, in peace during our lifetime sometime.
Can I answer that real quickly?
Yes.
I did the first raft descent of the Firat, the Euphrates River, back in the 70s. And it was before, I think it's the Kaban Dam was put in. And we went through, goes through Anatolia. It's one of the most beautiful gorges on the planet. And I don't think anybody has ever done it since, because there's a big reservoir now. It's been flooded, but it was an extraordinary experience. But go ahead.
And then there's another one from Panama, which says, would you like to come to Panama as well? I'm trying to find.
Of course, I've spent. Yeah, no, I spent.
And to combine it with South America, but you have done many things about South America, right?
Yes, yeah, we go to virtually every country in South America, and I've been to Panama. I love Panama. It's fantastic, and one of my goals has always been to cross the Darien Gap, which is the thickly forested area that's almost impassable between Colombia and Panama. But the Mbara Indians are in there, and I visited them, so I've gone into a short ways. But one day I would like to do the whole thing. So.
Yeah, I think your enthusiasm and your energy is needed everywhere, because people are looking for that. Well, I think we can go on and continue and listen to your wonderful stories. I'm sure we haven't even touched the 10% of what you could tell us, but that's a great start. But I mean, Skål, as I briefly told you at the beginning of our conversation, when we were waiting for the participants to enter, I think Skål and what you are doing has a lot in common.
Yes,
I think our relationship should be starting here, but should not end here. I think we should be in touch, I don't know if we invite you to visit our website, www.skal.org.
Yes.
On which you can find some more information about our organization. We are worldwide. You are worldwide, and your Steller app is very interesting, because it also covers the world. So we have many things in common, and I think we should look to creating some synergies together. Maybe we can be on your app. You can be. We are in the process of developing our own app now, connected with our website.
Good. If I can help.
I will be very pleased, because this is a new horizon for us. So we will welcome any help, any idea you may have. So I hope me and my board will be in touch with you. And I hope that this will be a good starting point for us to join hands and to do things together, so that the Skål members worldwide can benefit from your experience, and through them you can be heard around the world much more. You are already heard, but I mean there is no end to being heard more.
Yeah, I hope so. Skål.
Exactly, Skål.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining
Okay.
today. In fact,
Well, thank you,
there's a
guys.
message from our president to Burçin Türkan, who is also thanking you very much for your contributions today. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
everyone enjoyed what you said so far. But for more information about him and about everything he's been doing, please search the internet and you'll find some amazing stories. But as I said, together with Skål, probably we'll be doing more things together. Richard, is there anything else you would like to add and say? Any message to our members?
No, get on the road. Keep moving.
Exactly. It's time to go back, right?
It is. It's time to go back. So
we've been sitting too much.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Maybe I'll
All
see
right,
you in
Richard.
Croatia.
Yeah, if you can make it, seriously, it's
Okay.
mid-October from 12 to 15 or 16. We'll be
Okay.
very happy to, but we'll be in touch with you anyway. Thank you very much, Richard. Once again, it was a great honor and a pleasure to host you. So we look forward to doing things together. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank
Thanks
you very
a lot.
much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And dear colleagues, please do not forget our next appointment on the 28th of April for an online celebration of our Skål Day, together with our executive board, our president, and international counselors. That will be, there are two time slots. Please check the website for exact timings. We look forward to being with you to celebrating online our Skål Day all together. Bye-bye once again. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.